Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the E-commerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Welcome to another episode of the E-commerce Edge podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, your host. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome our incredible next guest, Alison Metcalfe. Welcome, Alison.
Hi. Thank
It's
you.
so good to have you along for the ride with me today. We had a brief conversation. You're based in London, in the UK, and we had
Mhm.
a brief conversation after IRX, and you were talking about the fact that you were starting to give independent consulting, and you had been independent consulting around merchandising, product management, etc. And that's your background, your history, your experience. We had a brief online conversation about, hey, do you think that this would be valuable for people in B2B just as much as in B2C and D2C? And I said, heck yes, this is something that a lot of B2Bs are not experts in. But before we get into all of the nitty gritty of merchandising, product forecasting, product management, etc., why don't you tell us how you came to be in this space? You have a heavy hitting pedigree. That much is for sure. Merchandiser Woolworths, merchandise manager John Lewis and Partners, merchandiser M & Co. You've been doing this for a really long time. Very experienced pedigree. Like, what drew you into this industry?
My friend,
Okay.
basically, my friend from school. And so he worked in shops and then decided to go into the head office. And for Topshop, I don't know if people are aware of it, it did go a bit global, went out to America, etc. So he was there and I was teaching. I did teaching to start off with. I was teaching English as a foreign language while I traveled the world a bit. So I was like, I think I need to get out of education. I need to know what the business world is about. So I went to all these companies and most of the companies wanted sales, and sales is not really my thing. I don't feel comfortable in that arena. So he said, you were good at maths, weren't you? And I was like, yeah, I did quite well at maths. So he was like, be a merchandiser, that's what I'm doing. And actually at the time it was called an allocator because that was the entry level position. So the entry level position is basically allocating the stock from the warehouse into a shop. That's essentially what it was at the beginning. And then you follow that route and either go into the warehouses or you stay in the head offices and work in the buying offices and work out how much stock you need to buy to sell to the customer, essentially.
And I guess that now starts to get into heavy areas of demand planning, demand forecasting, forward buying of raw materials if something's going to be contract manufactured. There's so much to this beyond, okay, I think based on our historical sales or a sales trend at this specific store for this specific season or this specific range of products, I think, okay, last year we did $1 million of sales. We think this year we're going to do 1.2. So therefore, we need to adjust the amount of inventory we hold or ship to that store. We're now starting to look at this on more of a regional, a national, and then an international basis, especially when you're dealing with very large retail chains that operate as a multinational business. This stuff starts to get complex pretty quick, right?
Yeah, especially when you've got franchisees as well. He might or might not buy your stock and they're on deadlines as well because you have to get their orders to the factory because their orders aren't big enough to run down the supply, when they open up. When you open up the production, you have to have a minimum order and their orders weren't ever enough. So we had to make sure that at each point you're communicating all the way through so that your franchisees, so that your wholesale accounts, so that your stores themselves, etc., all the information has to be ready. And it's generally because most of my areas have been fashion. So it's generally, you're looking at placing the orders probably about 6 months out.
And then you have in fashion indent ordering, right? Which is
Yeah.
effectively a reordering of existing SKUs. And you go, oh, geez, okay, this range ended up selling twice as fast as maybe what we forecast initially. So we need to pay us a rebuy before we actually run out of inventory of that product or before that season comes to an end where we can't sell it anymore. We need to get a rebuy order in with our contract manufacturers or whatever it is, suppliers.
Exactly. Or, which is what you should be doing, is you're planning your options, which is, okay, when this runs out, you should have something in the background. So you will rebuy if you think it's going to last and you're going to have it into next season, but then you have to plan that as part of it. If you just go, do you know what, that was great, we're just going to buy into it. This is what's happened with some of my clients. They rebuy and then we realize that actually people had it there and then they don't want it again. So fashion is a tricky area because it might be that the trend's only there and then, or it might be that the trend's going on. So you have to weigh up do you have something actually that's good enough to replace that line? So that's brilliant, because then you've got your sell through. And I don't think people celebrate sell through as much as they used to, which is, oh my God, we sold out in 2 weeks. Brilliant. That's a success. Rather than, oh no, you've run out of stock. Yeah, but that's good, because
Yes.
that's well above sold. And we have so much product. And then the customers have other things to buy. So you always have to option plan further out. You have to be thinking, what's the next phase? And that's what all the high fashion, very fast turnover will be doing. They're in and out. They're planning all the time. Maybe then the successful lines they plan for next season, and then they'll be able to rebuy for next season, and they'll put it in that option plan. But in that, you have to think about not just keep increasing options, what actually didn't sell well this season that you now don't want for next season. So you have to constantly be reviewing each season. Even though you've booked it, you might be reviewing it before it even comes back in.
And I guess that's a very different proposition to something like seasonal products or like a Christmas tree, for example, where you go, okay, our fake Christmas tree, cool. We didn't
Yeah.
sell out, but we're going to carry that exact same SKU next year anyways. Okay, cool. We've got a few hundred Christmas trees hanging around in our warehouse. Okay, it's not great from a flooring cost perspective, but at least we're eventually going to sell them and liquidate them to cash next
Mhm.
season.
Yeah.
So I guess products that are evergreen, so to speak, products, it's a very different proposition when you have an evergreen product, or if you're in grocery and it's something that you're going to always carry. You're
Yeah.
always going to have milk. You're always going to have whatever bread. You're always going to have these certain things. And so therefore, you're not necessarily worried as much about total and full sell through as you are in something like fashion, where not only is it seasonal, but it's trend driven. And so you're in a situation where you don't want to be caught with a whole shed load of product when a new season hits, and when that old trend ends, you're now caught with a whole bunch of stuff that has to be disposed of. And we've heard the horror stories of fashion disposal around the world, right?
But the thing is, so fashion even has those core bestsellers. So it's usually the 80-20 rule, isn't it? 20% of your top lines take 80% of your cash. And they're generally the bread and butter. So even if you slightly amend it, you will have those bestsellers of some shape or size all the way through your seasons every day. And it might be a seasonal product that comes back in winter after winter or summer after summer. They'll be the same thing essentially, just slightly different. So I call that trading. So the trading piece, which is where you have non-fashion pieces that, you can just keep stocking, that's trading. Planning is when you just plan it, buy it, and then you can't trade it. So there's some lines, I think in any retailer, you would have both. So even trading areas would have certain seasonal lines that would work like fashion. Absolutely. It's just what fashion is like 80% of the assortment is that versus 20% trading, for example. Whereas a lot more trading departments would be 80% in and out, 20% will come out of the range. So, for example, my first ever job was in H. Samuels, where I did watches. So we'd do the 80-20 rule. That was the first time I really learned it, because we'd just get rid of the bottom 20 and then buy in the next. Even though those watches that we get presented them year after year, we just get rid of the bottom 20 every season, because what's
Yes.
the point of selling things people don't want anymore?
Yes. What's the point in tying up cash in something that isn't going to move? And I
Exactly.
think this is a big problem. I was working with, it's interesting you mentioned watches specifically. I was working, this is again many years ago, I was working with a major watch brand, a global international watch brand, who had both, they historically had only sold through retailers, both jewelry stores as well as mass retailers. And they wanted to add a direct to consumer channel play specifically with e-commerce. They had always done like annual warehouse sales where they would
Mm.
liquidate product that they hadn't sold, but they 100% or like 95% of their revenues came through the channel, came through the trade. And what they realized was and they went ahead and built this website. I even warned them right up front, do you want to have a conversation with your retailers? Because they may have something to say about this if you effectively are going to start selling in competition to them. Nah,
Yeah.
it'll be right. And then their retailers banded together after they launched their D2C website and said, if you don't shut this down, we're going to stop carrying your products. And they en masse made that
Yeah.
approach and basically banded together and got them to shut down the transactional portion of the website so that it became just an online catalog. Now, the challenge with that is that those retailers did exactly what you said. They only cherry picked the products and lines that they thought that they could sell and sell at scale, and everything else, all the other items in the range wouldn't have full range representation in market. And so this manufacturer was caught between a rock and a hard place. And
Mm,
they're like, we need a place to be able to sell all the
mm.
lines that our retailers don't want to carry. We want to have full range representation in market. We're caught between this rock and a hard place. And that's a real challenging place for both the retailer and the supplier to be, right?
Yeah, and I think it's about having those conversations, which I was thinking about after our conversation. It comes back to even so business to business, D2C, whoever you are, communication. And so the thing is that in another world, it would be if you are that stuck at rock in a hard place, you need to have that conversation, which is we can no longer stock you as a retailer because or we can stock you, but you're only taking percentage of the range. We have this full range that we need to get out there. So we're going to. However, why don't we talk about exclusives? Why don't we talk about what part of the range you want, which can only be offered to you if they're big enough? And you then start this hierarchy. That's a huge thing like Nike and things like that. They do. You know that you go into a JD Sports, for example, and they only get a certain percentage of Nike.
Yes.
If you're proper sports, Nike offer you one range, which is the sports range. If you're a fashion retailer, you get the fashion range. There's a whole lot more you can do that's not going to upset your retailer if you talk to them. What do they want from you? What do you need from them? But what are you not getting from them? And therefore, what do you need to offer that's not going to upset the apple cart, basically?
Yeah, and what they could have done, and I did suggest this to them, and they were like, "Nah, don't worry about it. It won't be a problem." And it ended up being a very big problem. I said, "Why don't you just tell your major?" Because they dealt with three major retailers that constituted like 80-90% of their revenue. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars worth of revenue here.
Yeah.
I said, "Why don't you just tell them, look, that's fine. You don't have to buy the full range, but what we're going to do is we're going to offer anything that the three of you collectively don't want to buy. We're going to be selling that direct. We're going to go direct to market with those products because
Yeah.
we need to sell through this because we never know in advance with 100% certainty what's going to hit in a given
Yeah.
market or region or demo. And so they're like, hey, we come out with 50 new SKUs a year or whatever it is, and we have these baseline SKUs that we carry every single year that are evergreen, but we're going to always be coming to market with new products to try to stay current. And some of
Mhm.
those are going to hit, some of those are not going to hit. We know that. But we can't just throw them away. We've manufactured them. We have to sell them. And so we're going to sell them through eBay. We're going to sell them through Amazon. We're going to sell them through our own direct-to-consumer website. But like you say, it really comes down to communication, transparency, and honesty with your channel and saying, look, if you don't want to sell them, we still have to sell them. And hey, look, does that feel like a reasonable approach to say, look, okay, we will offer the full range of products on our website, but what I've seen also work really well is we'll offer the full range for sale on our website, but what we'll do is we'll break you up into catchments and
Mm.
regions, and based on the place where we're gonna ship this item, we're effectively gonna give you a commission on every sale that's effectively coming out of your catchment that we assign to you,
Yeah.
it's within a certain region or a certain distance of one of your physical stores, and then that oftentimes makes them happy too because it's great. We don't have to stock it. We don't have to sell it. We don't have to merchandise it. We don't have to tie up capital, but we're going to just get a commission check every month for something that comes out of our region. Awesome. Brilliant way to go.
And
So I
yeah,
like those
absolutely.
options.
And also there's the other thing is going SOR. So it depends how the systems are set up. So ideally you could do SOR where you do sale or return and say, do you know what, you guys don't want to stock it. We either do it on our website or we do it as a sale or return where we put the money into the stock, we own it, or even we do the direct to customer shipping.
Yeah.
They order through your website. You don't, as a supplier or in terms of wholesaler, you don't have to have a website. Then you don't have to have the transactional piece. You don't have to have the finding the customers, etc. And then through that, you can then have these different ways of selling your product, but the risk is on you. So that's why. So there's three different models I understand. So you've got your where you basically have a contract at the beginning, which is you send the stock, and as soon as that stock in their warehouse and paid for, that's their stock, and they get rid of it how they want to. In the UK, there's certain laws as well. You can't say how much you can sell that stock for. The price has to be with the retailer. There's SOR, which, to be fair, on any website, the price is the price based on the retailer. You can't negotiate that. Otherwise,
Well,
you're
you can't
private
find a
listing.
map. You can't
Yes.
take the map in the UK.
Yeah, you do RRP. It is our recommended retail, but you can't tell anybody obviously what price they should be selling at. But then you've got the SOR where they hold it within their warehouse, which if they've got good distribution, that's great. Or it works like that. Or you've got it where you just put it as a marketplace almost, where they just put it for you, and then
Yes.
you fulfill the sale. So they're the three ways of working. And I think it's people get stuck in one way or another, and they don't think through the different options they have, that not all products has to be sold or replenished in the same way. And the more and more out there now, I think people are used to that now. Decathlon now has, for example, their one where they're like, we're not selling this. Next are the same. A lot of retailers on the website say, we're distributing this through our channels for our partners. And you might have a different delivery, you might have different packages, etc. So I think that world has opened up now.
Yeah, that third methodology, you're effectively talking about dropship, right? It's effectively,
Yeah.
I'm taking the order, but the manufacturer, the supplier, the distributor is shipping direct to the customer. And I've even seen it be done the opposite direction, which is to say, I, as the distributor of the product, the manufacturer of the product, as long as I know what inventory you've got in stock, and as long as you tell me, I will sell it through my website. But effectively, I'm going to send that order down to you to fulfill out of your inventory, and
Yeah.
that becomes credited as part of your sale, and you get the commission on that sale, but then you obviously have to fulfill it. And so
No.
we control the price because we're selling it on our website, but you fulfill it, you get the credit, you get the commission, or you get the wholesale margin or whatever it is, right? And so
Exactly.
I feel like exactly what you said, which is there's more than one way to skin the cat, so to speak, and you don't have to treat every single product, every single range, and every single category, and every single supplier exactly the same way. And so in the B2B world, we oftentimes see what's called VMR, vendor managed inventory. So it's okay, cool. I don't know. Let's say I'm Boeing and I've got a part store from a specific supplier. That inventory, they don't technically take delivery of that inventory until they walk into the cage, they pull out that component, and then they put it in an aircraft, right?
Yeah.
Up until that point where they pull it from the cage and scan it out of the cage, up until that point, they haven't purchased that item. And so the inventory is
Yeah.
there, it's on hand, it's available to them at all times, but that is inventory that's managed by the vendor. And so the cost of flooring that inventory falls to the vendor, not to the buyer of the product. But what they don't want a scenario where a assembly line at Boeing has to shut down because one component is missing from inventory.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's why they do this VMR model, which is, it sounds like it's effectively the B2B equivalent of sell or return, right?
Yeah, basically. And that's the thing is, I think everybody just wants to make the sales. The whole point of this is for everyone to make money. And that's
Yes.
what I think everybody forgets. So I have conversations with my clients about the factories. And for me, it's really important that you're sending over an idea of the production schedule so that everybody can work with it. But the problem that we have from a retail side is if you give over a bit more of an indication of what your thoughts are, then you get hold to it. And that's where there's that issue of what do you tell people? You don't want to get people too excited because the worst thing is delivering or asking for less than you actually wanted in the first place. But then if things do open up, then you need to have the flexibility to react back into whatever it is that you need to. Even if it's a new product line, you need it quicker, you need it faster because you've sold out, for example, or it hasn't sold and you need to push things back. It's always about having those communication meetings about where are you, what's happening, are you still on time on that production schedule? Is your stuff still being made on time, and should it be? Do you need it? Could they prioritize somebody else who needs something? And I think if you have those open channels, then it just works better for everybody.
And what I'm seeing in the B2B world is an increasing willingness to have complete transparency across every stage of the supply chain. So from manufacturer to master distributor or distributor, down to sub distributors, down to dealers or businesses that consume that product, a willingness for them to share stock on hand values like in a daily update sync all the way up
Mhm.
the value chain so that people can do more of a just-in-time delivery model, or at least the ultimate consumer of that item, whether it's a retailer or whether it's a business using that good in daily operations, or I don't know, they're a mechanic shop and so they use parts directly on their customers' vehicles or fleets or whatever it might be. By doing that, they can set like a min max for those SKUs and they can say, okay, here's my inventory level. Here's my min max level for that SKU. Now, as I push that up the chain, now all of a sudden, when I get to my minimum, then that will tell you what I have in stock currently versus the max value I want to have in stock for that SKU. Now, what you need to do is you just need to top me up and bundle a PO together over, say, a week's time. bundle all the items that fall below that minimum level, bundle that all up into a weekly PO. Here's a PO you can use for those orders, or here's a list of POs you can apply to those orders as you ship them. And then everybody across the supply chain, instead of having to worry about it completely in isolation and independently,
Yep.
now every stage up the supply chain can look at things much more holistically. And I've seen this even in the fashion world where they will have what they, I forget what the exact term was, but it was effectively a joint indent value. So basically, they'll say, okay, instead of having an individual MOQ for either a SKU or for a specific customer MOQ, instead, we're going to have a holistic MOQ across this SKU, which says, okay, cool. We need, in order for us to produce this product, rerun this product, we need 1,000 unit order. Okay. But that can be across all 5 of our retail partners. So if each could order for 200, that's great. If you get a trigger off that order to actually be made. And so showing transparency into the wholesale ordering portal around, okay, is this your MOQ or is this effectively a joint MOQ? And where are we at in relation to that joint MOQ today? And updating that you can see, okay, cool. This isn't going to be made based on, okay, the joint MOQ is 1,000 units. We've already sold or pre-sold 800 units. Cool. So I know if I order at least 200 units, this item will definitely get made or remade or rerun. And so I think that, to your point, we have to have transparency across every single one of those kind of metrics that we use to judge demand and to trigger off a manufacturing run. If we're transparent like that, it makes everybody's life easier. And it's not, let's face it, it's not secret sauce. It's not part of the secret sauce, that you should be hiding how much of a piece of something you still have in stock. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly. And I've always worked like that. Like I always have. And so we put down production schedules, which is we need X thousand of units for this particular fashion fabric. You might do certain types of fabrics for certain ones, and you start off with booking the greige, and you just say, okay, we will use that greige at some point. It might not be this season, but like we can hold it in greige. So I did school uniform, for example. So, that works really well in greige. So you just book the greige, then you make it, and then you flex around. Do you need trousers? Because you sold more trousers than skirts, but it's the same fabric. And do you need different sizes? Do you need this? Do you need that? Because booking up front too quickly means that you're making stuff that will just sit in a warehouse for ages, and then you'll run out of stuff that you need. So you've got to be so flexible. When schoolwear, we were placing orders a year plus in advance because it's to do with their schoolwear factories. Everyone wants their product at the same time in the September.
Yes.
So its peak is the same time. It's like Christmas. If you're a Christmas tree manufacturer, you will have peak at a certain time. So, there'll be lots of things about working out of peak. Things are cheaper if you book things at certain times. So again, in Woolworths, that was a big thing. We'd book our winter coats. We'd be like, okay, in down tools time, we will book our really cheap coats and we will just make, because we know we need 20,000 or whatever of them. So we'll book those. The other things that are more fashiony, we'll hold off. But in down tools time, we'll use this time. So, that's the thing is it's about, again, the manufacturers having those conversations about we need to employ our staff in down tools time when nobody else has orders, because we're a peak factory. We do peak product that doesn't come in, go out. So therefore, who can we use for peak time? So I've actually got a client in Australia. Their summer is a different time to ours. So they use the peak
Opposite
down tools time to get their product made. The problem is, obviously, when they fly off the shelf and their stock runs out, they need then in peak. So it's that managing the factories in terms of, it's great to get down tools time, but you can't use it all the time.
And what is your thought? My sense is, and again, I'm not an expert in this, you are. My sense is that demand planning, merchandising, stocking, trading, all these things which are so tightly interwoven with each other are part art, part science, meaning that sure, there's usually a demand planning module in every ERP out there in the market that will try to help you do some element of demand planning based on throughput, momentum, a bomb in the back end of the ERP saying, okay, we need these 3 components to make this thing, and we're running low on these 2 components, so therefore we're likely to run out of this thing. There are certain demand planning or inventory planning modules that typically exist either as standalone systems or as part of major business systems. but it feels that won't always account for some of the intangibles that a true merchandiser will know just based on experience, that their gut tells them, okay, my gut tells me, or because I had a conversation with the supplier and I know that they're having a problem, or just being able to forecast things using information that would fall outside the parameter of what an ERP has access to. You are going to know certain things about your market and about your category and about your stores that will never be reflected in a hard data system. And so it feels, yes, using software to help in certain ways is good, but relying on it 100% to do your merchandising for you, you're probably going to run into a problem.
Yeah, so when I got started, that was what, 20 plus years ago, I was told I'll be replaced by a computer. That was then. Obviously, AI all started in the 60s, etc. But I was told, and I'm still not being replaced. I'm not sure if I ever will. I'm not sure. I've heard all the stories about we're going to all be replaced, etc. But I'm not sure. We always talk about the co-pilot type thing, not co-pilot AI, but co-pilot as in with the AI system. Assessment tools, they need parameters, and the parameters aren't necessarily the kind of restrictions that you would think. It's more about cash flow. So the biggest thing
Yes.
is cash flow. So I've worked in lingerie, for example, or kids' shoes. There's 64 SKUs to one thing because you have widths and half sizes,
The
etc.
size
Like you have
curve and the design
just like
curve.
okay, yeah. So just one, say that t-shirt in a lingerie item would be 64 sizes.
Yes.
So bras, etc. Kids' school shoes, they're all huge SKUs. So you've got to balance up. If I made all of those available in the departments I worked in all the time, I would have taken the company down. You
Yes.
cannot afford that stock. The stock would be turning way too slow. The covers would be way too slow, and you would never make a profit because you'd have to spend it all on warehousing and buying more product. So it's all about understanding how much money you need to invest in your bestsellers, what your peripheral sizes are, how much money actually you have, how much do you need to spend? And actually, and this will come down to a lot, I think this is very common. Do you need the SKUs? As in, do you have something that's doing exactly the same thing that you're splitting the sales? Because if you're splitting the sales, you've just wasted half of your money because you've had to set up a product the same twice. You've had to pay marketing to market it twice. You've had to pay the warehouse to open a pick location twice. And the customer would have bought either and didn't really care. There's a whole balancing act between how many options do you actually need to give the customer choice without overwhelming them and without giving them choice where you're actually losing money. Yeah.
And I think there's the tyranny of choice too, right? Like, also, it's not just is it tying up your cash flow, not just would they have bought this other thing, but consumers in many instances, if they can't, like, I've often wondered, I walk into a general merchandiser and I'm looking for just a generic pair of black sweatpants, for example. Doesn't need to
Mhm.
be anything special. I'm going to use these to walk my dog, and that is it. That only my dog's going to really see me in them, so I don't really care. But then there's 4 different, slightly different styles of black sweatpants, and I'm going, this makes, and now if now I don't personally care because I'll just grab the first thing that I can find on the shelf that's my size because I'm a bloke and I'm like that. For some people, they would stand there for 15 minutes trying to figure out which pair of black sweatpants they should buy, even if they were all the same price. And
Yeah,
even
and
if they
then
had,
they'll walk out. If they're overwhelmed, they'll walk out. They'll be like, "Oh, it's too much choice." And that's where you've got to be aware of what you're showing to the customer. Are you overwhelming them with actually, is there a difference? Can they tell the difference between the products? And if you're putting different prices on the product, can they see the difference? What is the point of this one that's 10 quid more? Can they see the visible difference? In the sign-offs that we'd have, it'd be conversations like that, which is, okay, this is our range. This is what we're presenting. This is what we're going to buy. Okay, you have your standard price hierarchy, which is good, better, best. So you have your good
yes,
entry-level price point, your average price point, and your expensive price point. Can the customer see the perceived value in difference? Like, it has to be the question every time. And if they can't, then why are you doing it?
and do you have, and for every single product, should you even have best, good, better, best? If it's a
It just depends.
pair of sweatpants, do we really need good, better, best? I guess if you were a high end fashion store, a fashion brand that had some special cut or some special fabric or something like that, then maybe you would only have better and best. You might not have good, but I'm guessing if you're like a general merchandiser, your job's even harder because in many instances, you don't necessarily need to have good, better, and best in your shop.
It just depends. So you might have good, better, and best in different categories. So it might be that this is, so you could have it within a category, or you could, if you sell a lot of stuff in that product area, then yes, definitely. But it might be that you have a value line. So you would choose, I don't know, a selection of 10 options that are your good range. And you might have like a 5-pack t-shirt where you get 5 in there, you might socks or whatever. You know, you might have a 2-pack jog set where you're getting quality, you're getting it cheaper because you're buying in multiples. It might not always be multiples, but if you start doing it singles, then you're competing with your mid-range. So your mid-range wants to be a little bit more spec. So it might have a nice embossed print on it, or it might have some detail on the neckline, or it might have something that gives it more value, perceived value. And then your premium is the kind of thing you're likely to go out in. You'll spend more money, what you really want to be seen in, etc. It's what's your customer looking for from you. So, you know, and you need to work out, are you a value retailer? So 80% of your range needs to be good. Or are you a mid-range retailer, which is 80% of your range needs to be in the median?
Yes.
Or are you premium and you don't want actually any good at all? Or actually you have a good, that's not anybody else's good. It's your
It's higher than anybody else's good.
very high. So yeah. And but yeah, so that's going even to the designer range. They do couture, they do have different ranges. They have to everybody who can barely afford them. They have the next range where it's even better. And then they have we do this for you. This is personal and we will design it for you. So that even in these premiums, they have that hierarchy. It just
There's
doesn't stop.
stratification.
Yeah.
So in the Birkin bags, we still got stratification, in other words. And how do you feel about house brands? Because I see whatever the UK equivalent of a house brand is.
And we call it own brand generally.
Own brand, an own brand versus. So I don't know. Maybe I'm a sports store. I've got my own name brand, but I also sell against Nike and Lulu and Adidas or whatever. But my good range is always going to be my internal brand range, and then the premium brands are always going to be these other brands. Or maybe I'm going to try to go head to head against a Nike and say, okay, I'm going to have some really unique technical fabric. We down in New Zealand, there's a brand called Kathmandu, and they do a lot of technical outdoor gear. And they've increasingly moved to creating their own versions of things like Gore-Tex, for example, but it's their own technical shell that they've had designed and made for them, so they don't have to pay a royalty to JJ Gore, whatever their company name is now. And as a result of that, they own that IP inside the business. And so it makes their margins better. It also helps them to differentiate versus the REI down the road or the North Face or whatever carrying the same type of Gore-Tex based product. So I feel like some of these house brands, they can serve multiple purposes, all the way from expanding either end of your range where maybe you've got some gaps and you can plug those gaps with your products, owning the IP, being able to make a better margin, not having to pay these exorbitant fees to the brand owners. I feel like I'm seeing more of this, especially in supermarket, but just everything I'm seeing more house brands emerge everywhere.
I think so. So it's a way up. So it costs less in some ways to do own brand, but then it doesn't. As in, if you have to pay an entire buying team to develop that product and you don't have enough people to do it, what's the point of doing it yourself? If the demand in your store is not enough, then you bring in the brands to do it. The own brand is only where there's volume. You can't do it without volume. So you have to have the volume there, but you can. The problem with having reliant on brands is if they cut your best-selling line and they no longer supply it, you have no control. So I've been there many times where you go, but this sold the best. Where is it in your range? And they're like, yeah, good question. Can't buy my. And so that's the problem, is when the control is with the brand, you're reliant on what they've decided and what color palette they're doing or whatever they've decided that works for them, because they will have, for example, if you're working with international brands, the UK is not necessarily their number one selling. So they may well have cut the UK's best sellers, but it's the UK's best sellers. So we would often have to then, as an own brand, try and produce something that a brand's just cut because we need it. So if you don't have your own brand, you don't have any control. However, if you don't have the volume, there's no point doing it. So it's they're all reliant on each other. So there's a whole element that's going on around the outside of, and also testing things like so actually I was thinking that all the way through the conversations, different times come up. How would you test something? So you don't know if it's going to be good or not. You don't want to go out on a massive MOQ. So brands sometimes have got the product that you are looking into. You can test it with them, or you do it and then you sell it off to other people. So say, for example, you want someone to stock your goods. You can do tests, for example, and say, look, I think this is going to be great. We want to test it. Could you do this with us, etc. So the thing as well is people forget about testing. Like you can test, but you just have to be ready to react to the test. So yeah, I think there's a lot, people forget to try it before they go full shebang, which is very expensive if you get it wrong.
It is. And how do you think that most major retailers have and will continue to respond to the likes of Shein and Temu and everything else, and even to a lesser extent, major brands like H&M, et cetera, which in theory, I've heard from the grapevine that H&M is sending literal storefront feedback, store floor feedback directly to manufacturing warehouses on what's popular, what's hot, what's flying off the shelves. It's literal from the coalface feedback back to the design team and back to the factories actually making this stuff and trying to get a better handle on demand and interest and trends and all that sort of stuff. And then obviously we have Shein, which I forget what the number is, but what is it, 8,000 or 10,000 new styles a week or something ridiculous like
Yeah.
that they release. So how do you think, because to my way of thinking, no single chain retailer, even if they're a fast fashion retailer, can compete at scale with something like a Shein when all their best styles and most popular products, the design is probably going to get stolen by Shein anyway. So
Yeah.
the question is, as a merchandiser, how does that change the game for the pace at which they have to work and their ability to pivot on a dime?
I don't think it's about that. I think what Shein don't do and what Temu don't do, because they tried to launch here and go on the stock market, they're not legal here, not being audited. Their factories are not necessarily legal. They couldn't prove they weren't using slave labor. So I think at some point it will implode. From that point of view, I was talking to my colleague who works in supply chain, and she works more in the sourcing on the buying side. And you do wonder when it will collapse. I'm sure it will always be what it is. But what I see coming through, which is what we see now, when factories produce things and sell their goods to the buying teams, it's not necessarily UK products that people will buy. Like some of the stuff that I'm advertised to, I'm like, okay, I can see people might buy it. Some of it is not to the taste of the UK customer. I can see that. And yeah, people might buy it for cheap, but I think the thing for people who work in the UK, have amazing product, it's keep to your value. It's what's your USP, what's your quality, what's your ethics. And I think I do worry about the AI point. And I do think personally that once everything's the same, nobody will want it anymore. So there's an element of personification, which we know about. But if it's AI personification, I'm not sure it won't be too samey. And people don't like too samey. They like difference. They like creativity. So always think, remember what your USP is, talk to your customers. And I've been hearing for years, it's about building your community. I don't think you can compete with community. And people like Shein and Temu don't have a community. People come to them for one-off purchases that they like. They don't have loyal followers. And that's like any value retailer. They don't have loyal followers. They have people who buy it because it's cheap. That's not a loyal community. That's not a base. So I think, and the thing is, yes, they're slamming through thousands and thousands of units, but it's never going to take away from that lovely, beautiful product that's a bit special. And even if I've been in trade fairs where people are like hiding when they walk around because of fear of stealing their product, because of the IP. And it is a worry. But have they actually got the USP? Possibly not, because it's just a reproduction We've seen fake Uggs, we've seen fake Burberrys,
Rolexes,
we've seen
faked everything.
fake Rolexes. Some are very similar, but there's always something that's just not.
Yeah.
So I think
And
if
how do you
you
feel about brands like Supreme? So you've pretty much just described Supreme, for example, where they create FOMO, they create through artificial scarcity, they'll create limited runs, they'll create limited designs, people will queue up around the block for the Supreme drop of a new
Mhm,
Supreme T-shirt, for example. But then sometimes, like Supreme, they'll sell themselves off to a private equity firm, or they'll sell themselves off to a house of brands or something like that, and then they lose that something special that
yeah,
made them what they are. And I've seen so many brands crash and burn and have to be bought back by the original founders or something like that to get back the intangible thing that made
with
them
the
great
ethos,
in the
isn't it?
first place.
Exactly. And it's so interesting that you can tell, like when we're going and doing brand visits, you can tell if the brands are happy. You can tell if the people work there are okay. When you go in and select product, you just know there's a real sense of it. And I think that is got across on the websites. And I think that is what you should be getting across on the website. You know, that you are a company that's ethical and cares about things. Not everybody will care, but there's that loyalty, and that's the thing that's people are going for, it's loyalty. So, you know, if you can build a loyal customer base, that is worth more than just lobbing out thousands and thousands of units just to see who would buy it.
Yeah, and I guess to your 80/20 rule point, even if you do have a loyal customer base, maybe only 50% or 60% or 70% of your customer base is loyal, and you use those customers become key NPD allies, new product development allies.
Yeah.
They help to guide your brand. They help to guide the way in which you communicate with the market. They help you to go out and secure those on the fence customers who would walk into a store and, okay, cool, maybe they're not a loyal customer of my brand, but if I put something out there that's really resonating with my community, then it's much more likely that that's also going to resonate with some random consumer that goes by the shelf and goes, "Oh, I really like that. I
Yeah.
really like that because it's been tested with your customer base." And to the point where some brands are even putting design like imagery out about their product on
Yeah.
Instagram or whatever and getting
Yeah. Yeah.
feedback before they even produce the bloody thing.
That's what I recommend to people. Use your best customers. I don't know which color I'm going to do. Vote on these three.
Yeah.
It's like free. They like it and will buy it because they chosen it. If you're not sure, I've literally given that advice because why would you not use your loyal customers to help you? But you do have to be aware of who your customers is, which is obviously going into marketing. But you can't differentiate between product and customer. Like you can't. So people who just buy products and go, oh, I need 10, I need whatever, you have to think about your customer. So, you know, you'll want certain customers who always buy markdown. They're valuable in their own right because you need to shift your stock. You need someone to buy it once you need to get rid of it. But they're not the ones you go and advertise to for your brand new product, which is full price. They're a different customer base. So you need
Totally.
different types of customers at different times, and they have their own value. And some are not worth much, but they're good at clearing your stock because it's better to clear your own stock than send it to a reseller who's not going to give you very much money for it. Try and get rid of it any way you can before you go to the resellers. But obviously, at some point, you need to go to resellers. And then, you know, it's about working out who you want to target, why you're targeting them, and who are you. And I'd say that's the biggest thing. And that goes to anybody, B2B, D2C. Who are you? Once you lose who you are, you've gone.
And I guess that is a really nice sort of crossing the T and dotting the I of how brands like Ross and Marshalls and these types of brands that are they cater specifically to the consumer that has a treasure hunting mindset and has the time and the
Yeah.
willingness to go through a store and find their size, their design, their style, and you could have a Nike product sitting next to an Adidas product, sitting next to a no-name brand product, sitting next to it's just a hodgepodge, right? And the funny thing about it is my wife and I, when we go to the US for a conference, we try to always find, is there a Ross nearby that we can go and we can spend a couple of hours just browsing because in many instances there are certain things available there that we literally can't even get at any price in a place like
Yeah.
Mexico or in other places. And so it is the treasure hunt mindset, because it's okay. I'm looking for this one little nugget of gold, and sure,
Yeah.
it might take me an hour to get it, and it might only be a $5 shirt at the end of the day. But I tell you, I've got some pretty nice button-down shirts in my closet that I don't think I've seen anywhere else but there. And so it's just such an interesting one, because you rightly said, like, there are some customers that they want it the moment that it hits the retail shelf. They want to be like the first in line to get that thing. And
Yeah.
they want to create a YouTube video about the haul that they got and the unboxing, and, oh, this is the first I'm the one of the first 100 people to get this thing, or I waited in line overnight at Culture Kings for a new drop, and I literally camped out with my mates overnight to be one of
Yeah.
the first 50 people through the door to get this thing, or the new Apple Watch, or whatever it is. So I
Yeah.
think you're right. I think understanding what the buying motivators of each of the demographics that you serve, that's such a critical thing, isn't it?
It's so important, and you have to understand it all the way through the supply chain. If you are B2B, if you don't understand who you're serving at the end of that supply chain, you're not going to make people happy. You have to know what you're offering, why you're offering it, and what the point of view is. What is your USP? Where do you sit in your market? And if you know that, you need to do what you can to make it as easy as possible for everybody to buy from you. So that basically makes everything easy, because the easier it is, then everybody makes money. The harder
Yes.
it is, then nobody makes money.
Everything gets gutted at every step of the journey, doesn't it? You're chasing the bottom line at the end of the day. And when
Yeah.
you start working with your customers, are you finding that the vast majority of your consulting clients, is it that they're having problems with ranging? Is it they're having problems with sourcing? Is it they're having problems with cash flow? Is it that they're having problems estimating and gauging demand? Is that they don't have the formulas in the business to even start thinking about these things accurately, and so they're getting caught out with a whole bunch of stock they can't move and they have to discount? What are the typical issues you encounter time and time again with the brands you work with?
I think is that most of the brands I work with don't have merchandising teams in them, because they're not at that level where, or their merchandising teams don't really know what they're doing. So there is a buying cycle. There are tools that are used in all the big retailers to do that buying cycle, and they'll be missing elements of that. So most of the time when I talk to potential clients, the question is, do you know how much to order, or do you have a stock problem? And it's either yes or no. If there's a stock problem, I can help them at any point. It could be any of those situations. If they don't have a stock problem, they have all the tools in place.
Wow. And I guess that also comes down to, they might have the science, but do they have the art?
Yeah.
They might have all the software, but
And it's not necessarily software. It's about, because you can do all of this in a very small retailer on Excel if you're not that big. Not one of the things that I do could not be done in Excel. Some of it in big retailers, there's no way you could replenish manually. No
no.
way. You need the systems. But if you're smaller, do you need them? Not yet. There's certain points when you don't need the tech. And then there's times when you've got to the place that you're big enough to afford the tech, and you've got enough kind of variables. That's when the tech comes in. But it's still a process, and there are tools in a system or off a system. It's the same thing. It's just sometimes you need it. You can do it manually. Others, it's too big. You need tools to help. So it's all about working out what you need, when you need it, and what's the best way of working it out.
Got it. Wow. It's such a fascinating topic, because I think this is going to affect every major brand at some point in their life cycle if they last long enough to get to serious volumes in their business. It's going to affect everyone at one point or another. I really appreciate your time. It's been a super interesting discussion about an area that I'm so far away from being an expert in this. It's ridiculous. And so that's what I love about having a podcast, is I get to speak to geniuses like you talking about things that I'm just so clueless about. So I really appreciate your time. Now, I will put a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes so that people can reach out to you there. But other than that, if people want to reach out to you and have a chat about all things supply chain, demand planning, forecasting, merchandising, all that stuff, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So I've got on my link on my website, I get a 30 minutes free consultation where you can just book in. and we can talk about what the issue is that you need help with. And that's probably the best way to start.
I absolutely love it. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. Get to let you ask me one question, any question you like. It could be personal or professional. Alison Metcalfe, what is your question for me today?
What's the best lesson you've learned in your career?
Wow. That's such a hard one, but I think for me, both personally, professionally, and with the businesses that I consult with is get out of debt, stay out of debt, and that like debt, I know people have different views on this and they say there's smart debt and dumb debt. There's debt you can leverage and all those other things. But in my personal experience of 50 years on this planet, my experience tells me get out of debt, stay out of debt, and move at the speed of cash, as Dave Ramsey says. And I have found that to be so true in my own life. It brings freedom to your life in ways that it's hard to quantify, it's hard to predict, and it allows people when they are free of debt and when they have a little bit of a cash safety net of some variety, it allows them to make decisions that they would otherwise probably not make if they had massive mortgage, car payments, student loan debt, credit card debt. When you are massively in debt, you can't just if you have a horrible job and you hate your boss, you can't just walk away. Even if it's killing you with stress, you can't just walk away because you are slave to the debt, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that this is true of businesses too, that a lot of them, they get out over their skis. They take out loans, they take out trading loans, they take out debt instruments, they issue bonds, they take VC money, they do all sorts of things that cause them to do unnatural behaviors that I think are unhealthy for their business. And that to me is a big concern. And that would be my piece of advice.
Cool. And that's what merchandisers do. That's the whole point of this.
Yeah.
Is to make sure that you can afford what you're doing.
I love that. Listen, it's been fantastic speaking with you. I really appreciate your time. I cannot wait to speak to you again soon. If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.